Well, thank you so much for that very generous introduction. Great to be able to spend just a couple of minutes with you in this session. And as we begin 2022, it is only natural to look back on 2021 and 2020 for that matter, and reflect on all that we have just gone through. It has certainly been a very tumultuous 24 months, and the COVID pandemic continues to make planning for the future especially difficult for all of us. And yet, as a gathering of leaders, turning our attention to the future is absolutely vital. In looking at how to prepare our clubs and our districts for all that lies ahead, it is important to identify the ways that this pandemic has fundamentally reshaped the world that we are looking to serve and engage with. Now, I think the best reflection on this theme was offered by someone named Lauren Padelford. Padelford is a VP at Shopify, and in the early weeks of 2021, he said this. He said, COVID acted like a time machine. What it did is it brought 2030 forward to 2020. I've got to say, this is so fundamentally true. As someone who has spent the last 18 years monitoring and forecasting trends, I can assure you there were many, many trends and changes that I thought were still 5 to 10 years away from becoming a reality that materialized throughout the course of this pandemic. Now, as a Rotarian, I've witnessed more change and transformation in the past 18 months in this organization than I've seen in the 10 plus years that I've been a member. Now, I'm sure that you could say the same as you reflect on the countless examples of creativity and agility and innovation that you've seen in your clubs and your district as we all very quickly had to adapt to COVID-19. So as we look to the future, how do we chart a course in the midst of the uncertainty, the challenges, but also the opportunities that confront us all? I would suggest that there are two essential mindsets for future-proofing our organization and gearing up to flourish in a post-COVID world. The first of these is to think tides, not waves. This is a metaphor that I often use to describe the difference between trends and fads, the difference between disruptions and distractions. And many of us, if we're not careful, are too quick to jump at changes that are like waves at the beach. By their nature, a wave is loud and it's exciting. It's hard to ignore. But a wave crashes ashore and then it retreats, not leaving a permanent mark. In comparison, the changing tides are slower moving, they're silent, and they're easy to miss if you don't know where to look. However, a changing tide will reshape the entire coastline over time. And the challenge for any leader right now is not to fall into the trap of jumping at shadows or getting distracted by the latest wave-like fad, but to identify the tidal trends that will define the years ahead for all of us. Now, reflecting on this in the theme or the context of COVID, a renowned economist based in Geneva named Richard Baldwin suggests that leaders have got to be careful to identify the difference between paperclip trends and what he calls rubber band trends. Now, according to Baldwin, many changes ushered in by the pandemic are rubber band trends. Over time, things will snap back and return to the way they were before COVID, just like an elastic band returns to its original shape after it's been stretched. However, other trends are like a paperclip. And if you bend a paperclip, no matter how hard you try, it will never regain its original shape. There is no going back. And as a simple example of what's set to be a paperclip trend, consider the demise of cash. Now, in many parts of the world, the move toward a cashless society has been slowly underway for years now. But the pandemic saw about a decade's worth of change happen in the space of just a few weeks as businesses stopped accepting cash for hygiene reasons. Now, in my own club, this is something that we had to grapple with too. In all of our fundraising and outreach activities, we had to move cashless very, very quickly. Now, as a millennial who never carries cash, I'd been advocating for this for a number of years, but there'd been strong resistance from within the club until all of a sudden our hand was forced. When looking at another tidal trend, you've got the change in the way that people are working, and this is such a significant one. There has been a fundamental change in the way people are approaching their career and work life. The shifts toward remote and hybrid work has been a steep learning curve for many of us, and for some of us more than others. I love this little video that went viral last year that underscores this point. And if you've not seen this clip, it's of a lawyer dialing into a court case remotely who had a filter on his Zoom feed by mistake.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to
Uh,
take
we're
a look.
trying to, can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I can see that.
Now, I think these moments of breathtaking awkwardness online are ones that we could all relate to at some level. We've sort of done things a little bit like this, haven't we, over the last 2 years? The big question now is, what's the future of work going to look like, and what's the impact of this on society? Now, according to research conducted a few months ago by the team at McKinsey's, although just 38% of people had any desire to work remotely before the pandemic, this number has now jumped to 63%. That is an enormous degree of change in the space of just 18 months. Significantly, about a third of employees say that if their companies now force them to return to the office full-time, they're going to be looking to change employers. And this is a big part of what's driving the Great Resignation, which you've likely heard a lot about in recent times. Now, this shift in people's work habits and routines has significant implications for how they want to engage with us and our clubs. I mean, for instance, professionals who previously might never have considered a morning or a lunchtime Rotary meeting might now find this actually works for them perfectly because they're working flexibly or remotely. Now, the reality is that life has changed for all of us in ways that we could scarcely have imagined just a few years ago. But this actually opens up a lot of opportunities for us and our clubs too. I mean, throughout the pandemic, many of us have become far more connected with our local communities than ever before. Now, people have all of a sudden realized just how important local community is for their sense of belonging and identity and the support that comes from these things. But we also became far more aware of how small our globe is. Now, for the first time in the history of humanity, every single person on planet Earth was going through the same thing at the same time. Now, for Rotary, this means that we've become an incredibly relevant vehicle for creating local connections and community, while also facilitating the sort of global impact that people are now looking to make. But capitalizing on this opportunity won't happen without intentional effort. And this leads us to the second future-proofing mindset. And number two, the second future-proofing mindset is to think progress, not precedent. You know, like so many successful and iconic organizations, Rotary has a proud heritage. Now, while the precedent of the past is a fantastic foundation to build on for the future, we must never let that foundation get in the way of future progress. Now, many of you will be familiar with the cliche definition of insanity, which is to do the same thing over and over again, expecting to get different results. Now, can I suggest to you, though, that we probably need to rethink this definition in light of all the disruption we've experienced in recent times? Can I put it to you that in 2022, it is now insane to do the same thing over and over again, expecting to get the same results? What I mean by this is that if we fall back into using the same processes and approaches that worked in a pre-pandemic era and expect them to work just as well in the future, we will be sorely mistaken. And the key question that we need to ask ourselves as leaders is, what did we have to do because of the pandemic, as opposed to what did we get to do because of it? Now, in our clubs and our districts, there have been scores of new approaches that we needed to adopt out of necessity that have not been ideal. You know, we had to shift all of our activities and our events, our programs online, for instance. And of course, many of us were amazed at just how effective and useful these were and how quickly our members adapted to an online format. But these digital formats have often come at the cost of a sense of community and belonging. Just as employers worldwide are now discovering the limitations of remote work when it comes to things like culture formation and collaboration, a sense of belonging, so many Rotary clubs and districts have realized that there's actually a unique power in physically gathering, something that meeting online will never really replace. And that said, there are many things that we got to do because of the pandemic. Now, as Winston Churchill suggested, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And in truth, many of the changes that we've made are ones that we ought to have made years ago. But this time of upheaval gave us the opportunity to take some risks, to experiment, to try new things. I mean, there is a reason, of course, that necessity is described as the mother of invention. We would do well to remember that. Now, what a shame it would be now to simply snap back to pre-COVID precedent just because that's the way we've always done things. The world has changed, and we must be careful not to apply 2019 thinking in a 2022 world. As we look forward, our focus must always be on progress, not precedent. We must be more loyal to the future than the past and recognize that this time of upheaval can be a gift if we build on all the positive things that we've learned. Now, when we look back on this tumultuous few years in a decade's time, how will we view it? Will we see this as a time that stretched us and changed us and set us up for greater effectiveness than we've ever known as an organization? I firmly believe this can be our story. However, that will only be the case if we write that story in our clubs and our districts. It's up to us.